Breaking news, we're dumb, and forgot to mention that we are giving away some dice on our Twitter account today. If you would be interested in receiving some free dice, just follow us on Twitter, leave a comment telling about the best advice you've ever gotten. So just go ahead and enter that, and then you'll be good to go. Thank you for your time. Back to the episode. Hi, I'm your DM, Jay.
I'm Air.
I'm Jerika.
And this is Insight Check, where we delve into the dungeon of your bad decisions and retrieve the treasure of wisdom.
Now that ritual's over.
Yeah.
And the demon has been summoned forth.
Mm-hmm.
Listen, sometimes when we go into this, it's like, oh gosh, what am I going to talk about on Dungeon Crawl? But today it's like, how many dungeon crawls am I allowed to have?
You're allowed to crawl as many as you need. You crawl it up.
Absolutely.
See, the more times you mention Matt Colville, the more money we get for the podcast, and the longer it can be. So obviously your first 2 dungeon crawls have to be about MC.
Does that stand for Matt Colville?
And now that he's been invited in, like a vampire, the rest of the podcast is his.
Can't leave.
This is his territory now.
Yeah. This might be the most earliest mention
Yeah.
of our patron saint and martyr.
Yeah, it's episode 34 is just Matt Colville with Matt Colville. How to Matt your Colvilles.
Hi, I'm Matt Colville. And I'm Matt Colville. And I'm Matt Colville. And this is Matt Colville Check.
Okay, so anyway, other Matt Colville related news. Critical Role has decided to launch itself off into a splinter company. They're going to be handling all their production in-house from now on. They're going to have their own studio, their own sets. They're going to be making new programming, so...
From now?
Merch.
From right now?
From very, very soon. Apparently they're doing the move on the 5th, and then after that, they should have their studio in the new studio space. Yep, so that's the word on the street as of right now. By the time this comes out, this news will, of course, be old news and irrelevant, but it's breaking news while we're reporting it, so hopefully you find it somewhat interesting. But more important than the incredible growth and prosperity of Critical Role is the fact that we have dice to promote.
Woohoo!
Specifically, I bought some Die Hard dice, and Die Hard is a great dice company. They're Die Hard metal dice. They are known for producing metals and plastics. Basically, anywhere you go, dice are going to be dice. There's not a huge difference in a dice you buy from one place to the next. So really what differentiates dice companies is the company. And what makes Die Hard metal dice different than other companies is that you can leave comments or stories, and they'll leave reactions. They'll write you back. It's very conversational, and oftentimes they'll give you overstock dice that they have extra, or stuff that they have sitting in the bin, things like that. They'll just send that out to you free of charge as a little bonus if you leave a comment. So they're a very nice company, and through this month, which this will come out on the 25th, I believe, so it'll be coming out right at the end of the month, they will actually be donating 20% of any rainbow dice, plastic or metal, to the Trevor Project. You're buying dice, which is always fun, and you're also donating to a good cause at the same time, and if you leave a comment, you're getting extra free dice as well. They left a very nice comment on my dice order, and they gave me a plethora of extra dice. I mean, I think it's 7 extra metal dice, which is as many as an entire set. So it's a wonderful gift, and I just, I think it was a great company. I just learned about them last week, and I'm hugely in favor of what they're doing. They seem to be really nice. And they didn't pay us, but they could if they want to.
Your ad here.
Jerika, did you have a dungeon crawl?
Is it my turn? I would like to push and continue pushing. Druid 101, a beginner's guide to channeling nature's might. This appeared today, the 18th, on D&D Beyond, and it was written by James Hake. He has written from my soul. We do not know each other, but I am a druid enthusiast.
As is well documented in these hallowed halls.
It's true. I cannot shut up about them. So this is a really good beginner's guide to playing a druid if you've never played it, or you feel like your builds need some extra optimization. He even breaks down choices that you make during the first 5 levels levels of leveling druids. He talks about the different circles, which is the druid subclasses, in terms of attack, defense, support, that kind of stuff. It's a real good article that you can find on D&D Beyond. And it is prefaced by a cute little vignette of sorts. Read more on D&D Beyond. Your ad here.
I have a confession for all of you, and I don't quite know how to say this, but my heart belongs to another. I know. I had said, and I had committed to this podcast, that my favorite spell in all of low-level D&D was Suggestion, and I, my friends, was wrong. The best spell...
You had not met...
I had not
blank
met
yet.
my soulmate.
God.
I know. Phantasmal Force is the I get to do whatever the fuck I want spell. I have never had to DM where someone has used this, and I count my blessings because it is a int save, which is a rarity, and you literally get to create an illusion in your target's mind that is anything you want. So it could be like hold person. They are encased in a 10 by 10 by 10 foot block of ice.
They
and
think
cannot
they're
move.
encased by a 10 by 10
They
by
think
10
they're
by 10.
encased and are thus paralyzed and suffocating and freezing to death.
So
and
you basically get to make the Matrix, is what you're saying.
Well, okay. To be fair, they're not suffocating. I don't think you can psych yourself into thinking you're suffocating so hard that you suffocate.
Or maybe they're just getting like really bad hypothermia and they're freezing to death and it's doing cold damage. It only does a d6 of damage, but it's outside the action economy, so it's a free d6 of whatever type is deemed appropriate to the illusion. But more so,
Isn't it in the action economy as an action as you cast the spell?
Yep, you do have to cast it once and you have to concentrate on it, but it's not like you have to like use a bonus action on your turn to like do the damage.
Yeah.
It just happens so long as the illusion holds up.
It's one of those great spells that rewards player creativity in
So
a way
it's
that
persistent.
Yes.
yeah, in a way that
Okay.
most of the time you only find in a narrative game.
Is it also that they have a save that they can roll each turn, or is it just they get that one chance?
They actually have to use their action to do an investigation check to see if they can assess that it's an illusion. So they're still eating up their action. Anyway, but yes, it is a very much a narrative focused, rewards player creativity kind of spell, because the amount of status effects you could afflict a enemy with,
Have you used it recently in a way that you wish to describe?
So we were in a massive Shadow Dragon fight last night in our game, and even though it had legendary resistances, I managed to burn them by telling Jay, I want to encase the dragon's entire head in a 10 by 10 by 10 foot block of adamantine. And Jay, because it never worked, I never got to tell you that I actually did the math, and it weighs just shy of 500,000 pounds, and there's no way it could have lifted it. So it was grounded, it was suffocating, it couldn't use its fire breath or its necrotic breath
But is it
on
really? It
us.
just thinks it is.
Its mind makes it real, as you said.
Whoa.
Very Matrixy. So,
Whoa,
unfortunately,
dude.
it never
No, that's
worked.
very like Bill and Ted's. I don't know.
Yeah,
One of them
it-
toking movies that I don't watch.
It
I don't know.
Anyway, yes, it's a mind fuck. It's fun. Try it out on your next bard. I think it's time for your DM, Jaraika,
Oh.
to show us how to improve our improv.
So it's both a respite from the day-to-day drudgery of listening to questions being answered, which is what you came here for anyway.
Alright, well maybe we don't need to call our show judgery.
And but it's also a way to talk about improvisation in D&D and trying to think on your feet.
Let me get my dice.
Yeah.
Cool. You are standing on the pull-off of a country road, waiting for a herd of sheep to pass. These sheep seem to be much quicker than normal sheep that you have seen.
Sheep are running across the road in an unusual fashion. A man with a crook is standing on the side of the road, not responding to this crisis of sheep passage. And then the heroes trying to get across the road are unable because they've been put to the side. The sheep stampede is blockading them. Then I would say to the players, what would you do in this scenario? What are you trying to do? There's a stampede of sheep, and you need to get by.
I'm trying to create some sort of parting of the Red Sea, but of sheep.
In what capacity? How are you doing that?
What a great question. Let me look at my spells.
Is there a sheepdog?
You don't see a sheepdog around, no.
Do I hear one?
Oh, make a perception check.
Ooh, 6.
Okay, 6. That's not a strong perception check. You think you may hear some sounds of animals, but you're not certain if it's going to be a dog or not.
DM, can I help her with that? Can I cup her ears with my hand so that she can hear better?
Okay, well, you should be quicker on the draw on that.
I should.
But yes,
I
go ahead.
asked her to try hearing again.
Yes. Offer her advantage. What you got?
12.
All right, 12. You can just make out the sounds of borking in the distance. Okay, what would you like to do to this dog?
I would like to animal friendship it.
Okay, you're going to cast Animal Friendship?
Yeah.
All right, let me roll the dog saving throw. What's your saving throw?
14.
Well, I got a 13 on the die, so that's one lucky dog.
Yeah.
So here's what happens, though. The dog, not particularly wise, has a -1 to wisdom.
Uh-huh. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Who's the big dumb boy?
It does feel suddenly inclined towards friendship with you.
Yeah.
Charges over, borking cheerfully.
Borking?
You have cast friendship. What are you trying to do now?
I am going to try to walk through the sheep with dog friend.
Okay, so you're using the dog's, like, sheep herding abilities, his
Yeah,
AoE.
and perhaps trying to move one half of this herd one way while other people move the other half the other way.
Okay,
Perhaps.
and Bert, you were looking through your spells. What were you going to do to part this Red Sea?
Well, it seems that my dear friend Bana has this well in hand. So while she's actually solving this problem, I've been physically lifting up and moving one sheep at a time in a comical display.
Absolutely. Go ahead and give me an athletics check.
Oh, I'm super good at those.
I'm positive you are.
I probably have advantage on it, right?
Definitely not. You've already used your hand to cup the ear of Bana.
I got a 3.
You got a 3. All right, so Bana, you part this Red Sea of sheep only to find one sheep sat on top of Bertram
I've
Beestinger,
been
who is struggling in the middle of the road, who's been somewhat trampled. How would you like to remove this sheep from this? It seems very happy where it is. Even the dog's borks are not affecting this sheep.
So, has the shepherd noticed our shenanigans at this
He
point?
seems to be totally zoned out. You don't know what's going on over there. He's just staring at the sky.
Wow. So I am going to, I think sheep eat grass, so I'm gonna pluck up a handful of nice juicy chives and waggle it under this specific sheep's nose to try to get it off my poor soft friend.
It turns out, according to this die, he's starving, and he does immediately follow you away from your friend, allowing you both passage across where you can then maybe counsel with the zoned out man at some other time. But that ends this scene. Now we can talk about some improv decisions that were made during that scene. First of all, Bert goes to a spell list, of course. That's Bert's go-to maneuver.
Magic solves all problems.
So Bana asks, is there a dog around? There wasn't, but there can be. So that's one of those situations where a player creates a solution. You can just roll with that. You don't, like, even if it's not necessarily in your scenario, if it keeps the pacing going and the action moving, especially in a situation like this, which is completely improv, why wouldn't there be a sheepdog, right? Like, it doesn't hurt anything. And so giving her that chance to perceive it, I gave her a roll, so it still feels earned. So it's still her having to kind of sleuth this thing out. And then here comes Bert to help her make that roll actually happen because, the dice weren't with her. So now he's engaged in the scene as well. That leads to the sheepdog. Now, Bana, Draika now, we're back to humans, our non-character names. Draika, what exactly made you want to go the animal friendship route?
Well, I always have druids on the brain,
Of course.
and that's a spell that they can get.
And it was, like, right off the top of your dome, too. Like, you are the druid aficionado. You knew right away what kind of spells your druid would have.
So I also thought, like, okay, what moves sheep around efficiently? And that's dogs. sheepdogs.
Yeah, it's a
So-
totally logical answer to the problem. The sheep herder is another thing to kind of aim for. You would have had to maybe wade through a sea of sheep to get to them. Yeah, you could bring in the dog. The dog's an obvious solution. Now, for me, I still think that there's a scenario in here for comedy or some sort of entertaining action. So I go to Bert, and I'm like, okay, Bert, what are you doing to see if maybe he can goof up something up or
And-
mess something up?
Oh boy.
Normally, Dreka plays the barbarian of our group, so having her solve something with magic would get my character's goat, even though it was sheep. So
Absolutely.
he would try to solve something with musculature, which he's
Oh, yeah.
very poor at, just out of spite. And then I knew that was
Because
going
the
to...
world has to be balanced. Of course.
Yeah, oh, of course. And I knew that would fail terribly, but that's the kind of thing where I wanted to lean into one of my weaker stats because I thought it would lead to a comedic moment, like me getting stampeded and trampled by sheep.
And it was funny for me. Specifically for me, it was very funny.
If you're not playing the bard as comic relief, are you really playing the bard? I
Right.
leave that to you.
And then, so I rolled under for the sheep, I rolled basically just an insight check with the grass. Like, is this thing going to be content to stay here on this, or is it like fooled easily? It rolled a 5, so fooled was the result on that one. That was just me as a DM just leaving it up to the dice to introduce some randomness to the scenario. I could have made that call myself. I could have been like, okay, she's come up with a solution with the grass.
It actually it felt better as a player in some respect to have the dice adjudicated instead of you, because then it kind of takes you out of it.
Yeah, you're creating this alternate space. You want to leave as much of it up to chance or whim or the universe as you can, because that makes it feel less like a person is telling you what is happening to you. It's like, no, this thing is happening to me.
A person is approving or disapproving of your decisions.
Exactly. This is just happening to me. Like, this is a place I am in. It's a real place in our collective imaginations, and we are there, and things are just happening to us. Nobody's determining what's happening. But like Bert making the decision to pick up the sheep is an unoptimized play. That's just for fun. And that's a huge part of improv and being a player. And it's part of why I love having the group that I have at my table, because they do make those unoptimized plays all the time in our game, just because they're interesting or fun.
So, like, in the sheep scenario, like, what is the optimized play? Like, I feel like, and we've said it, if you're having fun, that's the best play.
Yeah. Fireball? I mean, is it a fireball?
I
My
think
druid heart is screaming at you.
yeah. I don't think that there's, like, in a situation like this, maybe there's not necessarily an optimized play, but there are certainly unoptimized plays. Like, picking your weakest person picking up a sheep is an unoptimized play. But really, in what we're demonstrating just then, the goal, when you're improving, there are 3 or 4 great tools that you as the DM have. One is yes-anding your players' solutions. Because if you're improving, you don't have solutions. But you shouldn't, like, if you don't have solutions, the knee-jerk reaction to a player's silly idea may be like, no, that doesn't sound right. But they're offering you a way out of this scene that you've improved yourself into, and that you don't really have a way out of. So maybe yes and them and just take it and go with it. Because
So, like, a good example was the sheepdog in that scenario.
yeah, exactly. Like,
Yes, and.
that's a perfectly reasonable, perfectly manageable solution to the scenario. I don't have a real solution to this. I don't know why the sheep herder is standing there with his crook zonked out. So I don't have that answer ready for you, and I don't have the answer to why these sheep are running. All I know is that you have a problem and you need to get over it, and you've prevented me a way through that problem, so I'm gonna go with it. And it makes players feel dumb when you say, no, that doesn't work.
This is a really, I think, core piece of DMing that I struggle with, and I'm sure a lot of people do as well.
Here we go. The patron saint of our show.
So I know there's two.
Cha-ching.
There's 2 more, but you'll get to there. Tell me about
Yeah.
MC.
Yeah, Matt
Wannabe.
Colville just says it's not your player's problem to solve your puzzles, it's your problem to solve their solutions. They come up with answers, and it's up to you to figure out how those answers actually work out. But they do work out. Like, you don't want to force them down a path and then say, no, that's not the way I want you to go. No, that's not the way I want you to go. Okay, you finally figured out the exact way I wanted you to do this. Now you can progress. That's not fun for anybody except for maybe you. Another important thing with improving is buying time. So if I'm if I'm improving a scene and somebody offers me a solution and then it comes down to a roll, I will say, okay, why don't you tell me more about that role? And while they're explaining that role to everybody else at the table, I'm thinking in my mind about what's going to happen next. Because I've got to be ready when they finish their description to tell them what's going to happen next and continue this narrative. So not only is it giving them a chance to shine and stand on their moment of success or failure, but it's also giving you time to just keep one step ahead of the party because you're laying down the rails in front of the cart in this scenario.
And did you do that just now at any point?
For example, you're saying, like, you're going to get a sheepdog, and I'm kind of thinking about, like, what do I want going on with Bert? Like, what do I want going on with the herder? Like, what are these two characters doing in the scene? And how do I bring Bert into your solution? Because I don't want it to be a scene of just you doing something either. I want to make sure that everybody's equally engaged and getting time at the table to talk. So, and that's another thing that you're constantly thinking about as a DM is, like, who hasn't done anything in a while at the table? Because if it's been like 10, 15 minutes of playing with one person, you need to stop the progression and be like, okay, let's check in with other people on the table. Because this one person is kind of getting a lot of scene and everybody's enjoying that. But at the end of the night, you don't want it to be like over and then somebody's like, oh, I didn't really get to do anything. We all had fun listening to this other person interact, but I didn't get to do anything. That doesn't feel great.
And it can be tricky too if you have players like you likely your group is going to be a mixed bag of various degrees of, outspokenness and whatnot. My character tends to be very outspoken, so I worry I'm way too much of a scenery chewer. So it's really good when another player is called upon. What are you doing right now in the midst of this idiocy? I do want to say that if Draca couldn't have gotten the sheep off of me, I was going to lean in closely to its sheep face and dissonantly whisper, "You ate mutton."
You ate mutton. No, not mutton.
You're nothing.
And then you would have psychically killed the sheep.
Yeah, that was my plan. Give it an
Provoking
aneurysm.
a fight with the shepherd.
There you go.
He's pretty zoned out.
My third big tip for an improv DM is everything is in the notes, even if it's not. So, if you're improving a scene and somebody's like, hey, what's this character's name? Your response is, let me check my notes. Even if it's not a character you had made up, because it makes the world feel more real if everything's in your notes. So when you're checking your notes, what you're actually doing is opening up fantasynamegenerator.com and you're
Getting a name.
Yeah, you're generating fantasy names for characters real fast. And then what you're doing is you're not just reading that name to your players, you're copying that name and then posting it into any chat log that you've got going for your online game. Or if you're doing this on your phone, you're writing it down in your physical notes right in front of you so you don't forget that name before the next session.
And so you might also have some tools, a tool set, if you will, that you refer to in this manner often. And we talk about some of those, I'm sure.
There are tons of times where people will be like, will catch me by surprise or will ask me for a specific piece of information and I don't have the answer, but I have to have the answer for the world to be real. There has to be an answer for the world to be real. And it's not 100% necessary. I mean, it's not like the game's gonna be ruined if you immediately break the immersion and be like, Steve McFarmer. And everybody's like, oh, haha, you didn't have a name ready.
I do this all the time.
Yeah.
I was going to say, like, in the campaign idea, there was a shopkeep who I neglected to name, and when the players asked his name, I panicked and I didn't bring it up. So in, like, it is deep Cockney blacksmith accent, I was like, the name is Shibboleth apostrophe. And then they all laughed, and then they're like, what the hell is wrong with your name? He's like, my parents were mean. So, like, use the fantasy name generator.
It's fine, like, that's not gonna ruin anything. But at the same time, just an easy trick is just let me check my notes. And just the response can be, let me check my notes. They want to believe in this world. They have made that pact when they sat down with you. You can just keep going from there. But it just, to me, it just feels a lot better to say, let me check my notes, than to say, like, I don't know, John McJerpson. And then they're all like, oh, ha, ha, ha. Because that's funny, like, the first time. But, like, the 10th time it happens, it's more like, okay, now I'm starting to feel like, did you prepare enough? Like, did we catch you off guard? Did you have a busy week at work? Like, what's going on here?
Another Shibboleth? Was this a popular name when you were young?
Yeah.
So, I mean, you've outlined some really, really good tips and things to think about, and stuff that I can work on and we can all work on. What do you think the best way to practice stuff like this is?
Play a lot. Just keep playing and keep trying and keep messing up and failing. and then do it again. I think we had a very funny, awkward one in our game a couple weeks ago when I had the name of an important NPC's name wrong in a person's backstory. And I was like, oh yes, and you see, it's this person. And then the reaction is, who? And it's like,
Is that someone important to me?
and then the person's like, that's my character's code name. And I'm like, no, it's the name of the NPC in your backstory. And I'm like, no, it's not. And like, we're having this like super meta conversation at the table, and it's totally taking everybody out of the moment. But that stuff's gonna happen. Like, you can't know everything all the time and be perfect. And sometimes when you're reading over your character's backstory and you're looking for that name that you've forgotten, you see the wrong name. And you take that to the table as your DM prep, and whoops, now but everybody laughs about that once. You get one free. Nobody's gonna be too upset about it. If it's every time that they come across an NPC, his name is Sturv McJerbson.
Good old Jerb.
I don't know if it's as good.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Well, there you go. That's a good talk on improving, and improving is a real important skill. A lot of people believe that it takes a lot of preparation to be a DM. It really does not. With a few lines of notes and a basic outline of where they're going, and a few handy skills in improving, you can run entire sessions off of two lines of notes. Like, literally 2 sentences of notes can be just like my notes for last night's session is just like, they're fighting a shadow dragon.
Very succinct.
Yeah, and then I also prepared some letters from headquarters to one of the other characters for after the fight ended. Because I knew that they were coming after the conflict, I also included some funny jokes about, like, warning them of the conflict. So that way, I knew that they'd be reading this after the battle, and they'd be like, oh, shoot, we could have read these letters and known the conflict was coming. It's just a funny moment in character. And, that kind of stuff is where you would need to spend your DM prep time, like on props or handouts or magic items, stuff like that. Planning every NPC in every city they go to and every place that they might see or every person they might meet is not necessary. For that, improving skills are the best.
I want to say that Chris Perkins has said, you can run a 3-hour game on a single page of notes or whatnot. I think early on, DMs want to prepare every last detail so they can bring forth a world with great verisimilitude, and they'll always have the answers. And you're right, Jay, it is absolutely about just doing it over and over and over again to develop that muscle memory and that set of tools to, like, I need to buy some time, I need devices for this, that, and the other thing to really kind of be able to do it on the fly. You certainly can early on, but you can kind of let the prep and whatnot tends to be training wheels, and eventually you can ride without them.
Oh yeah, another really good one if you're wanting the players to, like, slow down for a moment and to spend some time amongst themselves, and you need to get ahead a little bit. You need to lay down some rail that they're about to go down. Another really cool trick that I always like to use is I will tell the players that they come across a conversation of some kind. So I'll have the players come across, like, some sort of shop or conversation or merchant selling some sort of interesting item. And then I will let them discuss amongst themselves whether or not it's something that they want to deal with. But just giving them, like, a little something to focus on. Just present them with something shiny. Just distract them.
Absolutely true. Absolutely true.
All right. Yeah, there's an improv class for you.
It was.
Didn't expect that.
It was. I think it was fruitful.
A good improv person is probably a lot better in the long run for a DM than a person who plans meticulously, because planning meticulously can really burn you out.
Burn out. Yeah, absolutely.
If you're spending, as long as you play every week planning each session, then you're going to be tired soon.
It's a very fair point. I think a lot of that advice comes from new DMs, and I think when most people start, they are meticulous in their planning, and, and then they develop those muscles. But yeah, it's definitely a great place to focus on early on, because then you can free yourself from the shackles of the notes.
And players are really happy to just hang out a lot of the time.
That's another thing.
Yeah, surprisingly, people just like each other.
It happens.
Yeah.
It's another thing Perkins said. He's like, just set up the scenario, sit back, and let your players entertain you.
Let's answer a few questions.
Yes.
So continuing on the vein of improv and preparation and running your game, we did get a question this week, which was about old books with 5th edition rules. So this person has a bunch of old 1st, 2nd, 3rd, and 4th edition books, but they want to know how easy it is to use those with 5th edition, what's necessary, what's required to convert those over. So we'll keep this short and sweet. The monster stats are all in the books. So find the same monsters from the old books, switch them with the new ones. If you find that the challenge has suddenly become too much, then you can just play with the numbers of monsters. Similarly, if it's become too easy, you can just add a few extra monsters. Action economy accounts for a lot of difficulty in 5th edition. 10 goblins can be quite threatening even to a high-level group because of the action economy. Yeah, just convert those monsters over. It's pretty simple. Skill checks and ability checks are basically going to be copy-paste. So a lot of these old, dexterity saving throws are still going to be in the old books. Or like in the old books, they may have like an acrobatics check, which in this would just be a dex save. So you'll just find the relevant ability score in the modern book to swap it out with.
Do you remember when we were looking at that Dragonborn book?
Oh, dear God.
There was a lot of vocabulary in there that I've never heard of in 5th edition. Should you just make your best guess as to what it would equate?
Well, a lot of that stuff is because it's a source book. It's calling on a lot of lore and very technical terminology. That's not quite the same thing. More for adventure modules, my advice applies. For actual meat and potatoes like races and classes, those are not going to convert as easy. You're going to have to do a lot of really noodly homebrew work where you try and figure out what the balance of each race and class is and what they get at what level, that kind of stuff. But for adventure modules and things like that, the conversion's pretty simple. As far as taking a monster whole cloth into a new edition, just find a monster of around the right challenge rating from the current edition and sort of just contrast how your monster measures up as you're converting it. So if you take an old monster like a dragon, you want to bring it to the modern edition, find what makes it unique, and then add those skills to an existing monster that sort of matches the parameters of what you're looking for.
So, posted by user Mitt Romney's gay dad on our Dungeons and Dragons.
Love it.
This new DM has asking for some quick advice. Hi, I just started a new campaign with new players. I'm running into a specific issue where my players won't leave areas or rooms without an insanely thorough search. I have a secret room or a hidden cabinet every once in a while, but they'll spend a good 15 to 20 minutes searching every single empty room. I'm worried about them boring themselves. I've got to the point where I say, there's nothing in here, or you found all the secret rooms. Otherwise, they refuse to give up on an area. I blame too many RPGs with Easter eggs. Is there a creative in-game way I can let them know they're all good in a certain area?
So I love the concept of environmental storytelling, where the stuff in the space and how it's arranged can tell you a lot about what the area is used for, what the people do in the room, how they live there, stuff like that. So I think that actually can hint really, really well whether there might be a secret something in there or not. And yes, okay, you can have the room be completely blank, but there's still 6 walls, 4 walls and a ceiling and a floor to scour. But if you say something like, we have kind of like what Jay did with Ordolf's castle, that we reached a long hallway and there was like a master's chamber, there was like a kid's chamber, there was like a series of doors along this hallway that were obviously like bed chambers and private study rooms and things like that. And I didn't really have any inkling that we should be searching beyond those rooms for secret things, because I thought they were kind of presented in that way. So I think that's good. I am in currently Tomb of Horrors on Thursday, and oh boy, that suffers from the look everywhere syndrome.
Yawning Portal, Tales from the Yawning Portal one?
Yeah, the Yawning Portal one. So it's very much like, because the first part of it, the DM that was taking us through kind of taught us to look for hidden doors, because there were a lot of doors that we had to roll to find in various ways in the first, let's say, quarter of it. And so when we get through to this storage closet thing that we walk into, and you'd think there would be no hidden doors off of, oh, alas and alack, there's two hidden doors. But I think that's also the nature of that space. So I think it's all about storytelling in the space and telling your players through what they see what kind of space this might be. If there's a library with bookshelves, that's a trope. That's something that people know. Oh, if I pull a book, sometimes there'll be a secret hidden door. If it's the back room of a temple and you know that like it's butting up against, you know, the far end of the temple, that's the end of the temple, maybe there's nothing there.
There's a single stone wall with a single sconce with a jagged groove underneath that seems well worn.
Exactly. Then there's that too, right?
Yeah, I wanted to pull back to when you were talking about we were in Citadel Umbra in the Moonshae Isles, and we were kind of making our way up it towards our inevitable confrontation with like anywhere between 1 and 3 big bad. I think we actually broke Jay's heart a little because he had a library or a study or something like that that had a bunch of like background information on the owner of the Citadel, who my character was somewhat infatuated with. And we skipped it, but the reason we skipped it and we didn't search too long in any of those rooms is because the overarching narrative was putting kind of a degree of psychological pressure on us. Like, we knew we were coming up to the culmination of this arc of the story. We knew that the big bad evil guy, who happens to be an evil druid on a flying island that can Independence Day laser blast anything underneath it, was moving towards the Citadel. And we also knew that a pack of werewolves was descending upon us. And so with all of that kind of pressure there, we were like, well, we could start looking for hidden treasure, or we could
live.
Or we could live. And we chose to live. And that's the thing. If you can put some narrative stakes in place, like that can help motivate your players, because the world doesn't stop just because they want to scratch the grout of between every single brick in every single room. Like,
absolutely.
There needs to be some sort of clock ticking that gives them incentive to not.
That they know about. Because you can have a clock ticking that they don't know about, which doesn't help anyone.
There needs to be some sort of interesting choice that characters are making at all times. And a lot of times that can be, how do we apply our time? Like, you're making a trade-off of something for something else. And in a dungeon, it can be like, sure, you can scour every room, but your enemies are fortifying positions. And now when you walk into this hallway, these enemies are behind barriers and have cover and have dug in trenches and have prepared for you.
If I may, I've been re-listening with the release of Dragon Heist and the Dungeon of the Mad Mage. I've been re-listening to the Arc of the Mad Mage Acquisitions Inc. campaign from several years ago now. And one of the things that, I guess, instead of Colville, I'm just going to big up Perkins this whole episode, that Chris Perkins does, is he does a series of cutscenes about the enemies being on the trail of the party. So they solve a room or whatnot, and then they move, several rooms ahead or another floor ahead, and he cuts back to the room they were in an hour ago, saying, you're kind of clearing the way, they're catching up to you. So it puts that kind of pressure on them to make their way through, because the MacGuffin at the end of this dungeon or whatever is something that is now being sought by 2 different parties, and they need to get there first.
Love it.
Yeah. Story. The secret is always story.
This has been another episode of Insight Check. Thank you very much for listening, all of our lovely people out there. If you enjoyed our episode or any previous episodes or future episodes that we do, please leave a review on iTunes, whatever level review you would like. Of course, it's up to you. We really, really do appreciate any and all reviews on iTunes that we get. We also would like to appreciate and greatly thank Amy T. Falcone for all of our branding and social media images. And of course, we would like to thank Vince Vept for our intro and outro music, Never Stand Alone. Super awesome.
Answering your cues from our collective A's.
This
Was
Insight.
check.
Well, children. Okay.
cool.
Did we do an episode?
I think so.
I think we did a shorty. But I think we're good.
Sometimes you need a shoddy.
All right. With that word of wisdom.
Really? Oh boy.
I can't wait to hear that after the music dies down.